Hi, this is Steve Gold for Real Time with IPC. You're watching the J-STD-709 Roundtable. Joining me is Joe Felstad, our technical editor du jour, Tony Sinise, who is with Panasonic Electric Works, and Dave Torp, who has been joining us all week representing IPC. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
I'll start with you guys. Tell me a little bit about the standard and what it's meant to do.
Well, the joint standard is really a kind of proactive thing that started about a year and a half ago in IPC after a halogen-free symposium in Phoenix. And stakeholders got together and talked about the plans of several large OEMs to go basically low halogen in some of their commercial products. This follows along a trend that's been happening in the handheld business for about 5 to 10 years. And the idea is to develop a standard for all of us that would define what the term halogen-free means, because it doesn't mean halogen-free. And we've been working on that ever since.
Yeah, the standard is a culmination of what I'll call environmental initiative, and a lot of the industry wants to be proactive in their environmental initiatives to be green. So a lot of the public perception and the public policy to the desire to be green has driven the desire to create a standard, and by bringing the subject matter expertise such as Tony into play to form the standard is what's required, because there's a lot of technology and technical terms with respect to the content of the standard, and determining what is a halogen, what is a BFR, what is a CFR, and what the detectable limits there are and the test requirements are, really requires subject matter expertise to determine those levels.
Yeah. I think putting a little bit of a framework for those that aren't familiar with why we're doing this is that there was a concern about flame retardants in laminates, and the potential for some of those when in incineration. Obviously, a flame retardant is something that you want to use in a product to make sure that it doesn't burst into flames. But some of the materials that we're using, they had been linked to some potential cancers. So taking a proactive position to try and ameliorate the issues by finding the right kinds of materials that would supplant those that have been somewhat suspect. I know from the perspective I've worked on with a number of other people on this JISO International Council, and one of the concerns is, as Tony alluded to, is that the terminology is difficult. And what we were looking for was a term like halogen safe, which would mean something, because if if the consumer does any studies on what a halogen is, they'll find out that, hey, we are a lot of halogen.
The problem is, salt.
Yep.
Sodium chloride is a halogen. It's a halide actually, but it is in the halogen family. Bromine that's used to keep your pool clean is a halogen. Fluorine that's in every Teflon coated pan is a halogen. Mm-hmm. And the idea that we would generate electronics that are halogen free, it creates a lot of issues amongst scientists and engineers, because first of all, it's just incorrect, and second of all, it implies something that's just not true. And so people have a hard time with it.
I have to ask, and this is maybe a simple question from a simple guy, but why is it that these groups like Greenpeace are going after halogens?
Well, it started in an unrelated field. There are, especially in Europe, end-of-life electronics often are incinerated, and when you incinerate at the wrong conditions, basically at too low of a temperature, certain brominated compounds especially can form dioxins. Dioxins and furans are tetragens, they're carcinogens. They're dangerous compounds. These things didn't come about in our industry, but the legend is that somebody burned a TV and there was somebody from Greenpeace there with a meter measuring the levels of dioxins. That's probably not true, but that's the basic idea. That led to several compounds being banned in the ROHS Act in Europe, not including the bromine that we use in laminate. And that bromine has been specifically excluded, and there's been a white paper done by IPC on the use of that bromine and the effects in the environment. That hasn't stopped the idea that dioxins might be formed under the wrong conditions anytime there's bromine or chlorine, and PVC is also a source of that possibility.
I want to address really quickly, there's been some negative press out there about this standard and the way it's been developed. What's going on there? Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of people who, there's been a lot of work done, but not enough work to evaluate the possible alternatives. One of the problems with any time you pull we have requirements in our industry for flammability. You can't just forget about the fact that we have to put a flame retardant in. So something has to be substituted. Those substitutes, although they're technically feasible, they really haven't been evaluated for the last 50 years like our current flame retardant has. The EPA is currently doing a joint project with other people, and they've issued a draft paper to talk about this, but we're a ways away, probably a year or two away from that study being completed.
So then why the sense of urgency to get the standard done?
There's a commercial requirement out there that several large companies have put a stake in the ground. They've said buy and pick a date, the end of 2009, the end of 2010, the end of 2011. We are going to make things like laptops that can be disposable halogen-free. And so there's a drive by all those stakeholders to push the industry in that direction. On top of that, things like mobile phones are almost all of the circuit boards in mobile phones are already halogen-free.
Right.
Or low halogen, as we call it in 4101.
So if you look at the industry from a requirement standpoint, there is a need because basically everyone's being subjected to a different set of requirements. And what the standard does is give a baseline where everybody can agree upon the requirements for going forward. And even if it's a guideline, it does provide some guidance rather than getting 4 or 5 different requirements from 5 different companies to submit your data to. And so it level sets the playing field, which is really, we're trying to be fair to everyone and make it as easy as possible for everyone.
Okay, very quickly, we have a survivor man waiting for us, but when is this going to get done? When are we going to see the standard done?
Well, the current idea is that we have 77 pages of comments that came in. We had 50 vote out of 80 voting people, so we got all those comments to resolve. In the meeting we had, Fern Abrams, who was the IPC coordinator for this, basically took a very heavy hand with people and volunteered them to work on these 77 pages of comments. And so by May 1st, we hope to have resolution. There's a lot of duplication in that 77 pages, but we hope to have resolution and then ballot this again. Probably ballot sometime later in the year, and hopefully the standard will, or the guideline, whichever we call it, will pass this ballot, or the next ballot.
And Tony, are you the chair of this committee?
No, I'm just a participant on this committee.
Great, thanks. I just want to make that clear for our viewers. Well, you've been watching our J-STD-709 roundtable. Thank you very much for joining us once again. Joe Felstad, Tony Sinise, Dave Torp. I'm Steve Gold for Real Time with IPC. Thank you for watching.